Yes.
As a fan of chimpanzees, I'd like to say I resent your reference to John Boehner as a non-human primate. Right.
He's the best tanned human primate currently in the House of Representatives.
Back to the first experiment. Seems to me you get a very strong prediction out of your model of little or no altruistic punishment.
Yeah.
Which is that if you announce this is the last round, you people will never be playing each other again, you should get 0 punishment.
Say it again.
If you say, this is the last round, right, you're getting one more chance to do this, right? At that point, according to your theory, there should be no punishment because there's no fitness here.
I don't think that's true. Mm-mm.
I mean, there are assumptions about what people's default expectation is for future interaction and what the cues in the local environment are. I mean, that neither this experiment nor any of the others out there, well, I wouldn't say not any of the others, some do address it, but this experiment takes for granted that something about expectations of future interaction as a baseline.
Well, but I thought it was entirely anonymous. There's no other person who knows what you're doing.
Yes.
So how could you possibly, I mean, if you're going to play the same round and you're going to be player 1 again, then I understand how I could deter somebody's exploitation of me.
You don't know that this is the last round.
Huh?
I mean, you don't.
No, but I'm saying if you said it's the last round,
If you did say it was the last round.
then you ought to get, on your theory, very much diminished punishment. Because you just abolished that reason for punishment.
If you think that mechanisms are tracking, if you think mechanisms are tracking the possibility that one-shot interactions exist in the world. I mean, I would expect it to be diminished. I would not be surprised if it's not 0, though. I mean, I would expect it to be diminished because chasing after you are investing costs.
So is that hard to do?
To get it to be 0?
Yeah, I mean, is it hard to do that version of the experiment? Because that'd be interesting.
That would be where you actually parametrically vary people's confidence that there's going to be future rounds. It's probably been done. I'm not familiar with it, but it would not be hard, no. And it would be enlightening.
You don't see any last move effects in iterative
Right.
public goods games.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in the interest of promoting affiliation rather than agonism, let me turn to your second versus third-party punisher experiment that you presented at the beginning. I think what Rob's remarks during the presentation.
We'll let Rob talk about
Okay.
Rob.
Well, I wasn't going to translate Rob. I was going to take my take on Rob's remarks. Right? That you haven't demonstrated anything about the absence of third-party punishment. In fact, your results replicate others in that if it was only about deterrence, there would be no third-party punishment behavior, and yet there is. What you have demonstrated is that people get angrier and they punish at higher rates as second parties than they do at third parties. And that's consistent with the private benefit that they get if there are no reputational benefits to being a third-party punisher. It's consistent with the private benefit that they get as a second-party punisher on the assumption that this interaction is iterated and that by punishing as a second party, they will deter subsequent actions. Right? But demonstrating that second-party punishment has higher individual incentives than third-party punishment doesn't address whether or not there is altruistic punishment. Okay, so you haven't presented any evidence that disproves the fair position, and in fact, you presented evidence that's consistent with it, because the fact that very few people punish is not the same as the fact that no one punished, and you're finding that some people punish, right, as third parties.
2 of 40.
Yeah, but let me.
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
say my position,
No,
which
do
is,
it.
If you were serious about this, you would tell us why you. I mean, there's hundreds of experiments which show third-party punishment. I mean, Ernst has in the original third-party punishment. First of all, when you put that slide up, you described it as of the Nature paper, the fair engagement paper. You completely misdescribed the contents of the paper. It's as if Ernst is just the universal boogeyman that you can say anything about. And
Please tell.
that's about iterative public goods. It's not at all about people intervening in disputes between third parties. It's got nothing to do with that. That's a different situation. And Well, it is a different system.
I mean, it's
Because
Rob.
private-
It's sort of. I mean, how is it? I mean, it's different because the game is different. But in
Well,
in
some
what?
of us think the payoffs matter, that people are tracking those kinds of things. But let me, so there are many experiments. In the original Swiss experiments, there was enough third-party punishment that the second parties, whatever you want to call them, the individuals who got punished or didn't get punished, were they just about lost everything they gained by unfair treatment. Subsequent experiments have shown that's extremely culturally variable. So the Henrik et al., et cetera, experiments show that in the third-party punishment game, there seems to be a lot of variation cross-culturally, and you can argue about what's going on there, but so there's lots of evidence for third-party punishment. So you must believe that there's something wrong with those experiments. You didn't tell us that. You just showed us
Okay.
one experiment that.
Those punishers in the third-party public goods games are punishing individuals who are in their groups.
Exactly. That's why it's different.
It's
But
not third. I mean, then so is it not third-party?
There have been many third-party punishment games, which you have a dictator game observed by a third party. The third party, and everybody knows this, no lying to the subjects, which is, if somebody else was here, there'd be arguments about whether your experiments are appropriate. But and in those experiments, the observers frequently, especially in Western industrialized settings, punish enough that the second players, the guys who either contribute or don't contribute to the recipients, lose all the benefits they get by, if you want, unfair, by reduced contributions to the other side. So there's tons of data like that, and so you've
Strategy
got an
methods.
experiment that comes out with a different result. Or quantitatively, you have some third-party punishment, but not very much. I agree. And so, but
Can I answer?
yeah,
Okay. First of all, this is just a methodological. It's wonky, but I believe that the standard third-party punishment game is laden with demand.
yeah, that's what you're going to say.
Okay, and that's what we were trying to create a demand-free experiment here, where it was not described as an adjustment. It was not described as it was two incidental things happening in your world, in your just passing. There was no more tip-off to adjust someone's outcome than there was for you to notice that the air conditioner cut off or on in the room. We were trying to create that's so maybe that's enough.
Well, I mean, that's another way of saying it seems to me that framing matters.
Okay, but if I mean, this is demand. I mean, I think demand is a way of expressing an expectation. So that's one thing. The second thing is a lot of these games also are played with the strategy method. And I'm very suspicious, very cautious about the strategy method. I mean, I know I just stepped on 10 people's toes, but I'm very cautious about it as a way of
You get the basic result without the strategy method. It is true that most of them.
I'd like to see the papers.
Okay, we did in the cross-cultural games.
That was played with an experimenter right here and a subject right. Okay.
You have to do that.
Of course, yeah, you do have to, absolutely. I don't know who to. Sir, yes.
Can I jump to your self-report diary studies?
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, did you get enough data where you could look and see if there were kind of, in terms of when people are reporting the kind of harm that they experienced, whether there were different kinds of relationships as far as with friends versus romantic relationships, and correlate that with the kinds of reconciliatory gestures and approaches of people's strategies?
I'm shaking my head because this is a problem that's plagued me as long as I've been doing this work. We can never get enough people with the same kinds of harms happening to be able to subset them out on stuff like that. So in a way, the research is kind of stupid because we're combining so many apples with so many different kinds of other fruits, when we're looking at all these kinds of harms. And because that's a great question. How would you reconcile differently with a romantic partner than somebody that you make pizzas with 3 hours a week, at the restaurant. So I wish we had the ability to get more data to break people out in those ways. I think that would be really interesting. But we don't, which is why we go to sometimes doing laboratory experiments with strangers, but those are stupid too in their own way, Yes, sir. And then I'll come back to you.
I'm going to try to sneak in two very quick things. The first is a question, just a clarification. When you were referencing mechanisms that would produce either revenge or forgiveness of kind of output behaviors, I kept thinking that these weren't mysterious or unspecified, that they were just the relevant emotions. And I just want to know, how do you conceptualize the, say, revenge adaptation that you've described as distinct from, say, anger?
Yes.
Or do you?
Well, we think probably anger is a big part of the motivational, is probably the motivational engine for revenge. I mean, anger can be used for a lot of things that are not revenge.
So then revenge is a happenstance where somebody wrongs me and I punish them, right? So then is that, I guess I don't quite understand the adaptationist claim that you're making.
Okay.
In terms of, because it sounded to me like there was a device that was well-designed specifically for revenge.
Right.
And that maybe interacting with but to some sense implicit throughout the talk, and sometimes explicitly, I felt as if this putative device was not synonymous with the relevant emotion. Anger, say in the case of revenge, shame and so on in the case of appeasement displays.
Right. I mean, I think anger is involved in, is clearly a key emotion that's getting involved in this. I think revenge is much more specific than anger, but it's a key part of the motivational hardware that's getting turned on by harm and mistreatment.
Well, I'm going to leave it there because time is almost up, and just throw in a quick suggestion, which
Yep.
is I and other collaborators have done work with oxytocin, and there's currently a lot of movement like DeDrew et al. And Campbell's theoretical work, which might be helpful for that part of your work.
Thank you.
Which is that, unlike Shelley Taylor's work, this is pushing more oxytocin as a facilitator of aggression and of just general approach. For example, the work I was involved with showed
By reducing amygdala activity or something like that?
Well, generally, especially in women perhaps, but generally depressing the fear to retaliate amongst other things. But also
very
having
good.
to do with the attachment and group affiliation in, say, group coalitional context. There's interesting work that DeDrew et al. Have done. They call it tend and defend.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay,
And
sure.
there's clear applications to, say, to parenting relationships and so on. But so with Shelley Taylor's model, it suggests, there's a problem, the social problem, I better go affiliate. And I don't think that's what's going on with the OT results you're getting.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a social
Thank you.
problem, I'm up, but the OT love story is I think it's misleading.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Leave it there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.